Welcome back to Odd Occasions, the channel where we explore the weird, the wild, and the downright bizarre. Today, we're diving into some of the most hilariously embarrassing police standoffs ever recorded, from cardboard cutouts to sleepy suspects. These moments prove that even in tense situations, things don't always go according to plan. So sit back, relax, and let's jump into the top 10 strangest police standoffs that will leave you scratching your head and laughing out loud. Number 10. SWAT engages empty apartment in a 6-hour standoff. In 2014, Dallas police officers rushed to the scene after a woman reported that several armed men had beaten and sexually assaulted her inside an apartment. This marked the beginning of a standoff that would last for 6 hours. SWAT officers arrived at the scene, fully geared up. They approached the suspects, requesting they surrender. One officer even yelled out, "Do what is right. We are not going to disappear." Tensions were rising. A police department spokesperson assured the media they were making every effort to work towards a peaceful resolution. But the suspects showed no signs of surrender. No movement, no response, nothing. For 6 hours, officers stood their ground, waiting. But finally, after hours of silence and growing frustration, SWAT officers made the decision. It was time to move in. They broke down the door, ready for action, only to find that the apartment was completely empty. Yup, they had spent 6 hours pleading with an unoccupied apartment. It seems the apartment itself didn't have much to say. And there you have it, a standoff with a very innocent, quiet suspect. We reached out to the apartment for comment, but unfortunately, we're still waiting for a response. Number 9. Cops brawl during drug raid. Now, this one is straight out of a comedy of errors. On November 9th, 2017, a narcotics raid in Detroit turned into an all-out brawl, but not with the suspects. No, this fight between two different groups of police officers from the same department. Here's what happened. Two undercover teams from the Detroit Police Department, one from the 12th Precinct and the other from the 11th, were both conducting raids at the exact same location, but neither team knew the other was there. Officers from the 12th Precinct were the first to arrive, taking positions outside the house. A little later, officers from the 11th Precinct rolled up, spotting two undercover officers from the 12th standing on the doorstep. But here's the twist. They mistook them for drug dealers. Immediately, the 11th Precinct officers ordered the 12th Precinct officers to the ground. One officer even pulled his gun, thinking he was about to make a big bust. What followed was nothing short of chaos. The officers from the 12th Precinct weren't going to just surrender to who they thought were civilians with guns. No, sir. They resisted hard, and then the punches started flying. Both sides began freely exchanging blows, fully believing they were fighting dangerous criminals. It wasn't until mid-brawl that someone finally realized they were all on the same side. Thankfully, nobody discharged their weapons, but fists? Oh, those definitely flew. In the end, this accidental battle royale led to some disciplinary actions. Since the raid took place in the 11th Precinct's jurisdiction, a supervisor from the 12th Precinct was reprimanded for failing to notify the other team. Detroit Police Chief James Craig called it, quote, one of the most disappointing things he'd ever experienced in his 40 years of law enforcement. Talk about a rough day at work. Number 8. SWAT engages cardboard cutout in a 3-hour standoff. This next one is something straight out of a sitcom. It was a quiet evening in Somerset County, New Jersey, November 2008. Around 8:40 p.m., an alarm goes off at a bank, setting off a series of events no one saw coming. 30 police officers were dispatched, all responding to what they believed to be a bank robbery in progress. When they arrived, there was still a suspect inside the bank. From outside, the officers could see through the windows. There was a silhouette. It looked about 5 feet tall, around 152 centimeters. The blinds were drawn, and it seemed like the perfect setup for a classic standoff. The officers sprang into action. Using loudspeakers and telephones, they tried to engage the suspect, pleading for a response. But their adversary? Completely silent. This back and forth or rather this one-sided conversation, dragged on for 3 hours. After an hour of waiting and getting nowhere, the SWAT team finally made their move. They broke into the bank, weapons drawn, prepared for anything. And then they found the culprit. It wasn't a hard-end criminal. It wasn't even a person. No, their suspect was just a cardboard cutout. That's right, 3 hours of tense negotiation with a piece of cardboard. A police spokeswoman later explained that anything can set off a bank alarm. Animals, balloons, even weather. But in this case, no one was to blame for triggering the alarm. As for the cardboard cutout, it didn't seem to raise any complaints, just quietly stood there the whole time. Number 7. Police engage stuffed tiger in a standoff. This one's a roaring good time, pun intended. It was February 2018 in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. Bruce Grubb, a farmer, was hosting a housewarming party when he noticed something terrifying in his cow shed. There, in the dim light, stood what appeared to be a fully grown tiger. Grubb, understandably freaked out, shined his flashlight at the creature to make sure he wasn't imagining things. But no, there it was, staring back at him. A real tiger, or so he thought. Worried for his cows and for himself, Grubb immediately called the police, even sending them a photo of the intruder. When officers arrived on the scene, the situation escalated. One officer, seeing the tiger in the distance, was too scared to leave his patrol car. More police units were quickly called in for backup. What followed was a 45-minute standoff between the officers and the tiger. The situation got so serious that they even contacted a local wildlife park to ask if any of their tigers had gone missing. But after nearly an hour, something wasn't adding up. The tiger hadn't moved, not even a twitch. Grubb decided to take a closer look. Driving his truck toward the shed, he finally got a clear view of the dangerous predator. Turns out, the tiger was nothing more than a life-size plush toy. That's right, the whole time, the police had been staring down a stuffed animal. Who left it there? No one knows. But one thing's for sure, it sure made for one memorable standoff. Ironically, the police department later adopted a plush carnivore as their mascot. Number 6. Police in standoff with a Stormtrooper. In February 2019, California Highway Patrol officers found themselves in a high-speed pursuit with a Ford Mustang. The chase was intense, speeds climbing, sirens blaring. But then, the driver exited the highway and veered into a residential neighborhood. It seemed like the chase was coming to an end when the car finally stopped. The driver and one passenger jumped out and made a run for it, but there was still one more figure in the back seat. The officers, weapons drawn, aimed at the vehicle and shouted commands. "Step out of the car!" they ordered. But the backseat passenger? Not a single response, not even a flinch. One officer yelled out, "I know you're in the car!" But still, nothing. The standoff went on for several tense moments. Finally, the officers cautiously approached the vehicle, ready for anything. And then, they understood. The passenger wasn't ignoring them. It was a life-size Stormtrooper doll from the Star Wars collection, sitting there, motionless. That's right, all that tension, over a plastic trooper from a galaxy far, far away. Eventually, the human driver and passenger were apprehended. But the Stormtrooper? Well, let's just say, he wasn't putting up a fight. Number 5. Standoff ends after robot snatches suspect's rifle. In September 2016, deputies from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department found themselves in an intense, hours-long standoff with a murder suspect named Brock Ray Bunge. Bunge had already attempted 2 robberies and was linked to a previous murder attempt. When deputies closed in, he fled, disappearing into the desert. A police helicopter eventually spotted him, hiding behind a bed on a raised berm, surrounded by shrubs and a wire fence. Ground officers couldn't get a clear view, and Bunge wasn't responding to demands to surrender. The standoff stretched on for 6 hours. Finally, law enforcement decided to bring in some high-tech assistance, a $300,000 bomb disposal robot equipped with a camera and a robotic arm. Its mission? Not to attack, but to quietly get close enough to retrieve Bunge's rifle. As the robot approached, law enforcement noticed something crucial. Bunge was lying face down with his gun at his feet. The problem? The robot wasn't exactly silent. Bungie could have easily heard it coming. So, the authorities devised a plan. They flew a helicopter directly overhead, creating enough noise to mask the robot's approach. At the same time, officers yelled through loudspeakers, adding to the chaos. Meanwhile, the robot inched closer and closer, and then it reached out with its arm and snatched the rifle right from under Bunge's nose. Incredibly, Bungie didn't notice a thing. It wasn't until the robot returned to lift the wire fence for a better view that Bungie realized something was wrong. He reached for his gun, and it was gone. With no weapon left and completely outmaneuvered, Bunge finally gave up. Number 4. Sleeping during standoffs. In December 2014, law enforcement officers were dispatched to a home in Whitecourt, Alberta, Canada, after receiving a call from a concerned citizen. The complaint? A 41-year-old man, drunk and making serious threats to shoot someone. Upon arriving, police discovered the situation was even more delicate. The house contained a child and 4 other people. Tensions rose, and a 7-hour standoff ensued. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the hostages calmly walked out of the house and told officers he fell asleep. Just like that, the standoff came to an end without a single shot fired. But that's not the only case of standoffs ending in snooze mode. In March 2016, in Newark, Ohio, police found themselves in another bizarre standoff, this time with a 75-year-old man who had fired shots at his own bed and walls inside his home. Despite repeated demands for him to surrender, the man didn't respond. It turns out he was partially deaf, but that wasn't the only reason. After hours of waiting, police heard the sound of snoring coming from inside. That's right, the man had fallen asleep during the standoff. Officers sent in a surveillance device, located him sleeping in his bed, and moved in to peacefully resolve the situation. They woke him up right at his bedside. The charges: creating fear and wielding weapons while under the influence. A reminder that sometimes, even in a standoff, a good nap can bring things to a close. Number 3. Standoff ends after police negotiator sings Christmas song for suspect. It was the holiday season of 2018 in Spring City, Pennsylvania, and Nathaniel R. Lewis, a 34-year-old man going through a tough divorce, was about to bring an unexpected twist to the Christmas spirit. After a series of personal struggles, Lewis barricaded himself inside his home and fired shots, which led his sister-in-law, concerned for his safety, to call the police. The situation escalated the next morning. When law enforcement arrived, Lewis responded with more gunfire. Officers returned fire, and a tense standoff began. For hours, SWAT negotiators tried to convince Lewis to surrender peacefully, but he wasn't having it. Until Lewis made a surprising offer. He said he would surrender if the negotiator would sing White Christmas by Nat King Cole. Now, that's not exactly standard protocol in hostage negotiations, but the negotiator agreed. After 10 tense hours, the song began. And to everyone's relief, it worked. The negotiator's rendition of White Christmas finally convinced Lewis to give himself up, just like he promised. The standoff ended peacefully, leaving everyone involved with a truly unforgettable holiday memory. It's not every day a SWAT negotiator sings Christmas classics to resolve a standoff. But hey, if it works, it works. Number 2. Disappearing suspects. On May 1, 2019, a bizarre standoff unfolded in Aloha, Oregon. Miguel Almarez Estrada, a 21-year-old local, fired a shot at the tire of a parked vehicle and then quickly retreated to his apartment. Officers responded, evacuating the area and setting up a roadblock. They tried everything: phone calls, SWAT, and negotiations. But not a single response from Estrada. Hours passed, and still nothing. Finally, SWAT moved in. They used a crowbar to force open the apartment door and launched a flashbang inside, expecting a confrontation. But when they entered, Estrada wasn't there. Turns out, he'd slipped away before the police even arrived. Hours later, he peacefully surrendered himself to authorities, leaving them to wonder how he'd managed to vanish so easily. But that wasn't the only case of a suspect pulling a disappearing act in 2019. Just a month earlier, in April, another suspect managed to slip away during a police standoff, this time in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Police arrived on the scene and immediately noticed a ladder leaning against a building, leading up to a window. Inside, they spotted a man peering out. The standoff began. Officers used loudspeakers, distraction devices, and even chemical agents to try and force the suspect out of the house. But after hours of negotiation and waiting, the house remained silent. When the police finally forced their way inside, they were met with a surprise. The house was completely empty. It seemed the suspect had escaped unnoticed, right under their noses. 2 suspects, 2 disappearing acts, and 2 standoffs where the only thing left was an empty house. Number 1. Murderer goes shopping during police standoff. In March 2018, Michael R. Reynolds, a 36-year-old man, barricaded himself inside a home in Terre Haute, Indiana. Refusing to surrender, he kicked off a standoff with law enforcement that would last for 2 days. But here's where it gets unbelievable. 12 hours into the standoff, Reynolds somehow managed to sneak out of the house. And what did he do with his newfound freedom? He went shopping. A neighbor even saw Reynolds leave, but didn't report it to the authorities. So the police continued their siege, completely unaware that their suspect had already left. Where did Reynolds go? Walmart. There, he casually made several purchases, including a mobile phone. After his little shopping spree, Reynolds didn't go far. He slipped into another house, just 3 blocks away. It wasn't until Walmart employees reported seeing Reynolds in the store that police realized their suspect had gone for a quick shopping trip. And by the time the authorities caught up with him at the second house, the situation escalated, ending in a deadly confrontation. So, while the police were locked in a standoff with an empty house, Reynolds was busy running errands. Well, that wraps up today's episode of Odd Occasions. We hope you enjoyed these strange and hilarious police standoff stories as much as we did. If you want more odd and entertaining content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our next weird adventure. Thanks for watching, and remember, life's full of odd occasions, so keep laughing at the unexpected. See you next time.